You know, I really don't want to do this video, but I feel like if I don't, a previous one I've made is never gonna age well. At least that's apparently what Blue-Pilled Cuck has told me. Or what Tim Summers thought, where he said that there's nothing wrong with Lauren's reasoning, even though Lauren couldn't break her reasoning down into any type of form we would recognize as logic, I'm sure. Apparently the arguments I brought against her are very weak. But he brought in his own incredible argument. The people involved in polygamy are indeed ugly as well. Well, considering that we're talking about polyamory and not polygamy, I'm sure he checked his facts before he said anything. Alrighty guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, the subscribe button is always nice, shiny, bright red, and really freaking helpful. And if you're not, you know today we're going to be talking about Lauren Chen and her video on polyamory, but before we get into that, we have to get into fan art. First we have a The Chat is Very H embroidery by Glitterwolf Dragon, another Very H picture by Pola, and then a cute panda representation of Raz by Bathymat. As always, thank you all for your fan art submissions, and let's get right into Lauren's video.
We did a video about a 5-person couple. I don't even know if couple is a 5-person relationship.
Yeah, she keeps calling it a couple all the time to me, and it's like, listen, there's 5 of them.
I know.
It's not a couple.
It's not a couple. It is a relationship. There's 4 men, 1 woman, and all of the men are individually dating the woman, but they're not dating each other. So it's, yeah, I don't know how to describe it.
Some of our viewers call it polyandry, is what they were telling us in the comments that it was about.
Yeah, polyandry is simply a structure of a relationship where there's one female and multiple males. Funnily enough, there's apparently a survey of traditional societies in the world showing that 83.39% of them practice polygamy, 16.4% practicing monogamy, and 0.47% practicing polyandry. Nothing super important, but I did come across that tidbit while researching for this video, and I found it pretty fascinating.
I'm not up on the lingo, I suppose.
Me neither, and to me it's all... Why differentiate?
Yeah, it's all trash.
It's just like, listen, it's just, yeah, I don't care.
Well, if you're asking why we differentiate any kind of particular relationship structure, it's because labels allow us to describe things easier. It's about speed of communication. It's the reason why I don't describe your blue shirt as a textile piece of fabric woven vaguely into the shape of the letter T, with buttons sewn on and a collar fixated at the top, having a square multi-lined pattern not unlike a checkerboard, with a color not unlike the video files within my Adobe Premiere Pro suite. 1, that's convoluted as shit. 2, saying a blue shirt was a much faster way of communicating the exact same idea. So as opposed to saying a relationship pattern in which one female has multiple male partners, we can just say polyandry. But I know the real reason you're doing that is to earn some cheap points for your audience. Don't worry, I did the same thing like 35 seconds ago.
Yeah. So the woman, actually to make things even juicier, was pregnant with the child of one of them, and she claimed to be sure which one it was. I don't know though. So we have a clip of the video that we responded to all those months ago in case any of you had forgotten what we were looking at, or maybe you'd repressed it because you were so disturbed. Either is possible.
Huh, you successfully described most of my interactions with your channel. I'd honestly forget who you were if you weren't recommended to me half the time.
So in that original video we looked at how the household, you know, just the dynamic that was going on with all the boyfriends was not... It didn't seem like it would be a very stable one, right? We were skeptical that it was a healthy environment to be bringing up a child, which of course she was pregnant, they were going to be doing pretty soon. We also mentioned specifically how, statistically speaking as a parent, when you bring in people to your house who aren't biologically related to your child or children, chances for abuse skyrocket. That's not our opinion, that's just what the facts say.
Actually, that is what you're saying. You can do the defense of hiding behind statistics and saying that's just what the facts say, but people who say that 13% of black people are responsible for over 50% of violent crimes, 9 times out of 10 have an agenda when they say that, and they do the same thing where they hide behind statistics. The fact of the matter is, you are both giving your opinion and giving statistics. Own up to it.
Because I know some people were saying that we were being too uncharitable to them in our analysis of the situation.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, this past week, some upsetting news came out. Apparently, one of the boyfriends did send the baby, who's been born now, to the hospital, and we have an article about that over here. This is from the Post Millennial. They write, a 5-week-old baby was hospitalized in Florida recently after she was violently abused by one of her forefathers, Ethan Beauchamp. hope that's right, police were alerted to the abuse by hospital staff who called officers in to investigate after the baby was found to have severe injuries to her lungs and ribs, as well as multiple brain bleeds. The child comes from a home with one mother and 4 fathers who are conducting a polyamorous relationship. Bokon had been tasked with babysitting. When questioned, he told police that it was due to the difficulty he had sleeping while looking after the child that led him to harm her. Don't you hate when you have trouble sleeping? So you just have to beat a baby? Isn't that just, ugh, who has not been there, right?
So I'm going to come at this with an interesting angle, especially for my audience that knows me. I actually have to side with Lauren on this one. Lack of sleep is no excuse for harming anyone, especially not an innocent child that has no ability to control itself yet. I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 people in my audience that will go, no, you should stay in the polyamorous relationship because you're polyamorous, and I'm not going to do that in this instance. However, there is a fallacy we do have to be aware of, and that is post hoc ergo Proctor Hawk. Because based on the framing of this situation thus far, it seems like Lauren's going to go for the angle that this is just what happens in polyamorous relationships, which would be an incredibly dishonest angle to take, because child abuse happens in what are considered perfectly stable and functional homes as well. And I've already brought up my problem with the statistical analysis. For instance, I could use the fact, based on data, that children from religious families are less kind and more punitive than those from non-religious households. I'll be linking the source to that down below, but if I wanted to, I could use that fact to argue that no religious parents should exist at all. It would be incredibly dishonest of me to do so, but it's the same exact technique being used here, taking one aspect of the household and then lumping every problem that comes from the household onto that aspect.
There.
Upon investigation, it was determined that the child was attacked on 3 separate occasions. Tori Ojeda? I just fail at phonics. The child's mother had reported her partner previously to the Florida Department of Children and Families, saying that Bokon told her he had squeezed the baby. Okay, hang on a second. If you actually have to go report your partner to, like, I guess Child Protective Services, why are they still your partner? I feel like that's like a one-time thing, and then it just, the relationship is severed, their bags are packed, or, I mean, frankly, if you're a parent, they might actually, be at the bottom of a lake somewhere or in some crocodile bodies.
Isn't that the worst part about this? Is that there were 3 other men in this relationship?
I was about to point out that I have to agree with Lauren again here. There's no reason why child abuse should have been allowed more than once. Like, she should have kicked out her partner the first time that this happened. And then you had to open your mouth about saying, isn't it worse that there are 3 other guys here? Like, what does that actually have to do with the situation at all? There was one abusive partner. That abusive partner was not removed. That is an issue of negligence on Tori's part. If anything, I would get angry at the 3 people for not also intervening.
Yeah.
Right? And not one of them took any sort of measures to secure the safety of this child?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least we're in agreement with the reason why this is wrong. It's not that there are 3 other people that's the issue. It's that there are 3 other people and they did not also exercise their responsibilities as parents in this situation.
They're
not one. Like there's 3 of them. If there was one father of one person, if someone did that to a child of mine, there would be problems.
Yeah.
Right? Like definitely.
Of the 4 other people, none of them thought to kick this guy out. I don't like.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes to show you, it takes a village to raise a child, I guess is what the expression is.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. These guys had the bystander effect.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I don't like, from the perspective of this woman, the one with all the boyfriends, why bother reporting your boyfriend to Child Protective Services if you're still going to keep him in the house and keep dating him? Like, it kind of seems like you are the one in the position to make the biggest changes to that situation. You've seemingly done nothing.
And in another awkward series of events, I am again having to agree with Lauren. I mean, it's agreeing about a thing I already agreed on previously, so I don't know if that really counts, but yeah, if you're a parent and your child is being abused, remove the abuser.
The article continues. Ojeda's mother was horrified to hear about her granddaughter's broken leg, arm, and skull fractures. In reports to police, Bokon admitted injuring the infant and to hearing a pop while he did so. Bokon is now in jail and the child is expected, thank goodness, to make a full recovery. It is not yet known if Ojeda or any of the other fathers will be welcoming Bokon back into their Jacksonville home, or if his qualification of father will remain valid despite a potential prison term for child abuse. I mean, this is disappointing but not surprising, right? I mean,
No.
This was it was predictable, and I hate to say that, but I mean, anyone could look at the situation and see that was going to be inherently unstable.
Oh, finally, we're at the point where I can start disagreeing again. This was about to be a really boring video. While an argument could be made that the situation could have been unstable, the question comes down to why. What particular attributes do we find that made the situation unstable? Was it the extra people involved? I'm curious as to what your conclusions are.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, you could tell by that guy's body language in the video that he was not happy with what was going on. A lot of them had mentioned that they experienced jealousy in their relationship. Obviously, the guy is way worse than that. He deserves, a severe punishment for this.
Oh, yeah.
And it almost, it's a lot darker looking back at that video now. Initially, you have all this funny music. By the way, Barstool, I think it is. Barcroft, sorry. Yeah. Barcroft took down the video of that since, understandably.
It got pretty ratioed. It was not well received.
Yeah, and after this stuff, but the happy music behind it all, and you look at the guys...
And they're painting it to be like, oh, look at this quirky situation.
Yeah.
Like, how strange, but fun. It's like, no.
And you are aware that the exact same apologetics were used against interracial marriage, right? Like, I think this part from The Federalist says it best and portrays the issue completely and totally mask off. It says you don't have to care about Tories' consensual adult relationships, but everyone should care about unconventional families that statistically put children in risky households. Now, the funny thing is, they say statistically put families in riskier households, but if I were to appeal to a source that actually deals with these type of abuse situations all the time, what would they say? On the polyamory and abuse section for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, it says specifically that abuse can happen in any relationship, whether you have one partner, two, or even more. A polyamorous relationship is not any more likely than a monogamous one to produce abuse. The trick, though, is that it notes that poly relationships are not inherently abusive, but having multiple partners can create unique situations that abusive people can exploit, and therein lies the issue. If you have a person who is abusive or has abusive tendencies, and these tendencies are not put in check by either a therapist or by removing them from the situation, then you're giving an abusive person an avenue or thoroughfare to abuse. And even in the case of therapy, there sometimes are arguments for letting them get therapy to become a better person, but letting them become a better person distanced from you. There's no reason to let an abuser live in your home. This is why, if you are in a polyamorous relationship and you are dealing with fits of jealousy, even if you're not wanting to bring a child into that relationship, you need to get the jealousy and insecurity tackled. Jealousy happens even in monogamous relationships, and it leads to abuse there as well. In situations like this, I would highly suggest seeking a therapist for individual and for couples counseling, or I guess in this case, family counseling. I'll be providing the article from the National Domestic Violence Hotline that details a bunch of the unique scenarios that polyamory can present. But that's the thing, they are unique scenarios that can be tackled and can be dealt with, and polyamory, much like monogamy, is not immune to having individual abusive actors. There's nothing about polyamory that is in and of itself abusive. The only things that you can argue statistically are that there are more things that need to be dealt with in a polyamorous relationship in order to make it a healthy and productive environment for a child. For instance, I personally know plenty of people who had monogamous parents, but when one parent turned out to be abusive, the other one ended up enabling the former. This is because their perception of their partner was likely infinitely more positive than the reality of what their partner was doing to their child. If I were to go out on a limb, I'd say this is probably what happened in this particular scenario. Tori probably saw a better person in her partner, and likely her other partner saw a better metamor in her partner than what kind of actual person he was to his child, which again comes down to an individual case. You can't break everything down to raw statistics. If you did, then I have an argument that parents should not be allowed to raise their own children. The reason why? In 78.1% of substantiated cases of child maltreatment, it was the parents who engaged in maltreatment. By this logic, there is an immense amount of data showing that the majority of abusers tend to be parents. I can now, via your argument, argue that no parents should be able to raise their children. It's just far too dangerous.
Meanwhile, yeah, the child is in danger, and frankly, I said this in the video because I kept picking on the one guy, to be fair, like, you know who I'm talking about, right? The guy who I keep saying looks like Sid the Sloth, because he does. He freaks me out, and I'm hoping that this is the last instance of that child being abused.
Yeah.
But I think it's still at risk.
Oh no, of course, it's going to be at risk as long as it's in this non-traditional relationship. And we see, like, this is not our opinion, right? Even back then we were saying this is cause for concern. People got mad at us. We're going to go through that. It is not our opinion. These are statistical facts that increase the likelihood of abuse happening, and we see that there.
Again, post hoc ergo proctor hoc. You have individual variables, and you want to lump one of those variables as the reason for the abuse. They were in a polyamorous relationship, therefore the polyamorous relationship was the problem. Here are some more statistics to chew on for a second. Did you know that child victimization rates are higher in American Indian, Alaska Native, and African American parent households? Does this now suddenly mean that we should not, because there is a statistically higher chance of abuse in those households, allow any one of those ethnicities to bear children? No, it doesn't, because we're ignoring every single other factor that may have led to those higher numbers. It's not the race that leads to that. There are things like, I don't know, stress brought on from a lot of media influence that could potentially lead to having a much less stable household. I have no idea what type of media influencer would possibly increase the stress on the household of a family. No, this is not me excusing the behavior of an obvious child abuser. This is me pointing out that coverage like this is another factor that has to be considered when determining the stress of an individual household. People do not exist in islands. And given the nature of a lot of the comments on your original video and comments that I've received on mine after covering it, I can't imagine what kind of harassment these people in this relationship had to go through as a result of having their relationship blasted to the media. Again, this is no excuse for child abuse. I'm simply pointing out that there are multiple factors involved in this besides the polyamory.
This is based off of objective metrics, and I know some people were for some reason shocked that as a conservative I was not a fan of the situation. Funny that, but it's like, I'm not criticizing this because I feel like an inherent duty to protect tradition for tradition's sake. It's like, no, there's data behind this. Psychologists say this is not a good environment for a child. This is not stable.
Actually, psychologists don't generally say that. They say that it's a unique environment and an environment that presents particular issues, but they don't say that it is a bad and unstable environment for the child. The stability of the environment is based off of the individual parents involved, a problem that exists in both polyamorous and monogamous relationships.
You have the right to be a 5-way couple, I suppose. Knock your socks off, but we're not going to pretend it's a good idea when we know it's not, and especially if there's a child at risk, people need to say something. It's ridiculous.
While I agree that in a situation where abuse can happen, you definitely need to speak up, there are factors that do not inherently lead to abuse that don't need to be spoken of. For instance, when looking at an interracial couple, you don't say, hey, your partner's black, he's statistically more likely to abuse your child, you better watch out for that and find yourself a good old whitey. That would be a stupid argument, but it's an argument backed up by statistics, so it's your argument. If I were talking to another polycule that wanted to bring children into the scenario, the likely things I would talk about would be 1, the origin of your polyamorous relationship. Why did you decide to open it up? Did you open it up because one of your partners cheated and decide they wanted to open things up as a result? Because that would be an unhealthy reason to open up a relationship. Do you feel like you have to open up your relationship in order to keep it going? Another not very healthy reason to open things up. Does your polycule have any issues of jealousy and insecurity built in? How are you going to handle these things? And what measures does your polycule as a group, not you as an individual, take whenever mistakes happen with any part of your group? Is one of the members in your group attempting to isolate any other member of the group as a tactic of abuse? All of these considerations and more are things you're going to have to consider in a polyamorous relationship, and they are ducks that you individually are going to have to get in a row if you want to bring children into a stable environment. Ultimately, every argument that these two make against polyamorous relationships have been and can be made against interracial relationships or relationships from anyone of any other social class. Abuse is higher in poor families. Abuse is higher in interracial marriages. Abuse is higher in Alaska and Indian natives. But in none of these situations would we tell people not to have children. Again, I made the argument, though it may be a bit of a reductio ad absurdum, that abuse in 4 out of 5 cases comes from the parents, so eliminate parents from the equation. Obviously, they're the biggest threat. It's a silly argument, but the point of a reductio ad absurdum is to show that using statistics this way to frame your argument is flawed. If we were to break this down into a syllogism, your conclusion doesn't necessarily follow from your premises, and that's a problem. But that's all I've got for this video right now. The video itself is part of an incredibly long podcast that covered different topics besides this one, but this this is the one that I had covered before, so it's the one I wanted to focus on. If you have questions or critique, the comment section is always a great place to give that to me. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and definitely hitting the bell notification icon. If you hated the video, then at least make a point to share it with your enemies, and thank you all for taking the time to watch. As always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.